Scorpio. As the sky shifts over the mid-November horizon, something ancient begins to move, not in the stars above, but deep within you, like a door you didn't realize was sealed, now creaking open with a slow breath that carries the scent of something sacred. Something lost. Something coming back. And no, this isn't a metaphor. This is the moment your soul finally prepares to receive the one thing it's never truly had: a man whose presence doesn't confuse or confine you, but finally sees you entirely, brutally, and beautifully for everything you are when you're not trying to impress, protect, or perform. You've carried lifetimes of intensity in your eyes, Scorpio, and though others have stared into them, very few have ever entered. Very few have ever stayed long enough to witness the softness beneath the sting, the poetry beneath the armor, the quiet ache of a heart that has always loved too deeply for this world. And that's exactly why this particular moment in the stars isn't just another cycle. It's a collision course between the woman you've become and the love your soul has demanded. The universe prepare for you across dimensions. This isn't random. This isn't fairy tale fluff. This is Scorpio karma being paid out in divine timing. Because as of November 15th, year 2025, there's a magnetic pull forming in your emotional chart, a kind of soul frequency portal that doesn't open often. And when it does, it's not to attract flirtations or surface-level thrills. It's to deliver something permanent, something earned. And that's what makes this so different from what you've known before. This man, the one whose energy has already brushed your field in dreams, whose essence you felt in half-forgotten memories, whose eyes you might pass by in a crowd and feel your heartbeat stutter. He's not just entering your life. Scorpio is entering your story, and when he arrives, it won't feel like newness. It will feel like return. Like remembrance, like someone finally catching up to where your soul has already been waiting all along. But you must be ready, not just ready to receive, but ready to recognize. Because if you're still wearing the mask of control, if you're still sharpening your silence into weapons, if you're still building walls and calling them standards, you might miss the quiet miracle walking straight toward you. Dressed not in perfection, but in presence. Not in promises, but in truth. And unlike the ones before, this man won't demand your surrender, he will deserve it. And Scorpio, that's the key: not to lower your standards, but to finally meet someone who was rising to reach them the whole time. Scorpio, when he appears, and the stars have aligned to say he will, the first thing you'll feel won't be peace, won't be butterflies, won't even be hope. It will be fear. Not the fear of danger, but the kind that only comes when you sense something truly important is about to begin, something that could undo years of carefully constructed defenses, something that doesn't just want access to your world, it wants entry into your soul. And that, for someone like you, who has lived through betrayal, through abandonment, through the slow suffocation of pretending to be less than you are, is both thrilling and terrifying. And that fear is the first sign that this man isn't like the others. Because when someone false enters, you feel the absence of danger, but not the presence of truth. They don't shake your foundations. They simply distract them. But when someone real arrives, Scorpio, your body knows. Your mind races. Your instincts go wild. Because suddenly, there's something at stake. Suddenly, you realize you could actually fall not into chaos, but into clarity, and what you've called safety all these years begins to feel like a cage rusted shut with your own mistrust. You'll find yourself watching him closely, too closely, looking for the flaw, the lie, the inconsistency, and you'll want to find it. Because finding something wrong means you don't have to risk anything, right? You'll question his calm, his interest, his silence, You'll suspect motives where none exist. You'll be tempted to test him, to provoke him, to see if he folds when you bring out the fire. But here's the truth. Scorpio, he won't. He won't mirror your chaos. He'll hold it steady. Key it, unshaken. And that's what will terrify you most of all. Because when someone finally doesn't flinch, you're forced to ask if you're brave enough to stay. This fear won't feel like panic, but like pressure, like the air thickening around your chest when he looks at you without flinching, when he listens and doesn't interrupt, when he says he's staying and then actually does. It will be the kind of fear that comes not from danger, but from opportunity. The opportunity to be seen, truly seen, and loved anyway. And after all the men who have fled, faked, or failed you, that kind of love will feel suspicious. But it isn't. It's your alignment finally arriving. And yes, Scorpio, it will ask something of you. It will ask for your truth, not your performance. It will ask you to be soft without apologizing, to love without controlling, to let someone in without forcing them to prove themselves over and over until you feel safe. And when you feel the fear rising in your throat, the old urge to sabotage before you get hurt, remember, this fear doesn't always mean danger. Sometimes it means you're exactly where you're meant to be. Scorpio, you've been many things to many people. The mystery, the muse, the challenge, the one they couldn't quite figure out, but desperately wanted to possess. And through it all, you've learned how to show just enough to intrigue, just enough to feel connection, but never the whole truth, never the trembling core of who you are. Because you've come to believe through scars you didn't ask for and lessons you never deserved that the full version of you might be too much, too dark, too intense, too difficult to hold without dropping. But then, one day, maybe on a quiet afternoon or in a moment that looks unremarkable to the world, he sees you. Not the version you curate, not the version they all praised. He sees the part of you that still aches when no one's looking, the part that doesn't always feel brave, the part that remembers being left even after giving your all, the part you keep hidden under your sarcasm, your silence, your sharp intelligence, and the world stops for a beat because for the first time in what feels like lifetimes, you are fully visible and still safe. He doesn't flinch. He doesn't shrink. He doesn't try to fix you. He just stays. And his staying will rattle every bone in your body. Because Scorpio, you've mistaken survival for love for far too long. You've danced with those who came alive in your fire, but ran when it burned. You've whispered your dreams into ears that only wanted your body. You've opened your soul only to be handed back disappointment wrapped in false promises. But this time, the man in front of you is not making noise. He's making space. He won't flood you with words. He won't promise eternity in the first week. What he will do is show up again and again. On the days you shine and the days you disappear, on the days your inner child screams and the days your outer woman goes silent, he will show up when you expect abandonment and meet you there with a gaze that says, "I'm not going anywhere." And that's when it hits you, this isn't fantasy. This is frequency. This isn't a high It's home. Because when someone finally holds your pain without fear, holds your past without judgment, and holds your present without needing to change you, that's not just love. That's a mirror from the universe itself saying, "See, you were never too much. They were never enough." Scorpio, it happens quietly, not in fireworks or declarations or grand public moments, but in the hush between conversations, in the stillness after the laughter fades, in the soft pause, when you realize for the first time in what feels like a lifetime, you're not scanning the horizon for the storm. You're not rehearsing exits. You're not watching every word like a tripwire. You're simply there, in the moment, with him. And there's no war in your chest telling you to run. No past ghosts clawing at your shoulder to remind you, this can't last. It's just stillness and peace and something terrifyingly rare for a heart like yours, safety. And that's when the real battle begins, not between you and him, but between you and yourself. Because Scorpio, you've survived so much that survival became your default setting. You're used to fire. You trust intensity. You read silence like scripture and analyze every gesture as a potential betrayal because that's what kept you alive, your ability to anticipate the fall. So when something finally doesn't fall, when someone actually holds, actually stays, actually sees you and doesn't turn away, your body doesn't know what to do with that kind of calm. You'll wait for the shift, the crack, the reveal, the familiar cold that always follows warmth, but it doesn't come. He keeps showing up. He keeps choosing you. And you realize with a strange ache that this stillness is the thing you've wanted all along, and yet you're terrified to trust it. So you test, not out of cruelty, but instinct. You retreat. You get sharp. You pull back to watch if he follows. And he does not with desperation, not with pleading, but with quiet certainty, with a grounded presence that doesn't chase, but invites. He doesn't punish your pullback. He doesn't guilt your fear. He meets it with patience. And Scorpio, that patience will melt. Something in you didn't know was still frozen. That's the moment your guard begins to soften. Not because you're forced, but because for the first time in years, you want to. You find yourself telling him things you've never said out loud, not to be understood, but because you know, finally, you will be. You stop hiding your tears. You stop editing your passion. You stop diluting your fire just to feel small enough to be accepted. And that's when love starts to grow. Not from scarcity, not from fear, but from truth. Because Scorpio, this kind of love, the kind that stays, listens, breathes, and doesn't try to fix, is a portal, and once you step through it, there is no going back to less. Scorpio, once you stop running, once the noise quiets and the sharp edges of your defenses finally soften in his presence, you don't just fall in love. You remember what love was always meant to feel like: a homecoming, not a battlefield. A rising, not a drowning. A space where you no longer have to perform your strength like a shield because he never asked you to be anything but what you already are: whole, intense, layered, luminous, and suddenly, the things you used to call too much become the exact reasons he shows up every day. Not because he's trying to save you, but because he wants to walk beside you, not ahead, not behind, but right there hand in hand, soul with soul. And from that moment forward, everything shifts, not because you change who you are, but because you finally allow who you are to be seen in full light without shrinking, doubting, or apologizing. And the life you start to build with this man doesn't feel like some distant dream finally granted. It feels like the most natural next chapter. Like the continuation of a story that's been waiting for you to believe in it again. And as the days unfold, so do your patterns. You stop second-guessing every text. You stop rehearsing conversations in your head. You stop preparing for the goodbye that never comes. You start making plans not just for next weekend, but for next season, for next year, for the future, because you no longer fear things ending when they finally begin from truth. And more importantly, you begin to notice yourself in new ways, softer in the mornings, steadier in your thoughts, lighter in your laughter, and all of it blooming not because of who he is, but because of how seen you are in his presence, how your energy no longer wastes itself defending, explaining, or fighting for crumbs of connection, because now, Scorpio, you feast. You feast on emotional depth, on consistency, on reflection, on growth. And what once felt unreachable becomes your everyday, not in dramatic gestures, but in the quiet intimacy of two souls who have stopped pretending, who speak in glances and silences, and the kind of language only built by time and trust. And when the old fears visit, because they will, you no longer let them drive. You acknowledge them. You honor them. But you no longer obey them. Because now, this love didn't come to complete you. It came to mirror you, to walk with you, to remind you that all those years of waiting, hurting, healing, and hoping weren't wasted. They were the preparation for the kind of partnership you were always meant for. And as you stand beside him, not as a version of yourself, toned down for comfort, but in full Scorpio power, passionate, wild, spiritual, resilient, you don't just feel loved, you feel chosen. And maybe for the first time, you realize you were never too much. You were always the standard.